Uhuru, you're listening to the Reparations in Action podcast and FM radio show. My name is Brendan McCoy, and today I am hosting Reparations in Action, which broadcasts weekly on Black Power 96.3 FM in St. Petersburg, Florida. Reparations in Action, also known as White Lies Shattered, is a program of white solidarity with Black power. We believe reparations to African people is the key question of our times and is one that demands action on the part of European or white people. As always, I want to start by saluting our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela in the African People's Socialist Party, for leading the African Revolution and developing the theory of African internationalism and the understanding of the colonial mode of production. African internationalism is the theory and worldview of the African working class that guides the struggle for African liberation, and which we credit for all of the understandings and analysis provided on this podcast. I'd also like to salute Black Power 96, WBPU 96.3 FM in St. Petersburg, Florida, where this show is aired and recorded for our podcast. Black Power 96 is not just explaining the world, but changing it. You can get the app for Black Power 96 on Google Play or the Apple App Store and listen wherever you are located. This past March, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement had its annual national convention at the Uhuru House in St. Louis, Missouri. We had the honor of having Chairman Omali Yeshitela deliver the keynote speech for this event. You can find the entirety of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention on USM's YouTube page. Here's Jamie Simpson introducing the chairman for the keynote speech.
Please help me in welcoming Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru, I want to thank I want to express appreciation to Comrade Jamie, who in some circles is known as the voice. He's used a lot with the radio stuff that we do, and you can hear why. I would also like to express my deep and most profound appreciation to Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And moving in that trajectory or in that direction, I would also, of appreciations, I would like to appreciate Comrade Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela. And I do not do this as some kind of obligation, in the sense that we have a relationship of some sort. Most people who know us and know Comrade Omali Yeshitela recognize the critical role that she plays in this movement. I mean, it is fundamental, it is profound, it is deep, and cannot be overstated. And I think everybody who knows us truly recognize that to be the case. So I wanted to acknowledge that. And also, obviously, I have to acknowledge Comrade Penny Hess and Justin Neville, two of the Uhuru Three, amazing forces, amazing, courageous comrades. I cannot overstate the courage and the brilliance and what it is, integrity that they bring to this movement. I do see it replicated in so many of our other forces here. And I am so proud to have this relationship with you. And some of you, it's been a relationship for a very long time, some for a short time that appears to be a long time, because of the intensity of the work that we do. It doesn't take much. We used to say a long time ago that it takes something like 7 years to develop cadre, but it happens hot house fashion in our movement. And so I just want to recognize and respect that and respect you and all of you who have come to participate in this incredible convention. I cannot, again, overstate your courage, because I know what it means that you have to swim. Is that a word? Against the current, like to get here. And speaking of the Uhuru Three, and it always already been recognized the significance of these incredible lawyers who worked with us in terms of this case, this frame up, this garbage that they threw at us that we had to fend ourselves from. Just because it's garbage doesn't mean you don't have to remove it. It's garbage that they threw at us. And of course, they were Leonard Goodman, and they were Mutaki Akbar. They were Leonard Addie Griffin and Tom Inskeep. Did I miss anybody? And Angela, who know. Who knows more about us than we know about ourselves. Angela was the person who was obligated to read the 2.5 million books that they took from us, at least the equivalent of that in 13 terabytes of stuff that they stole from us. And Angela, she was going through it all, and she was there, just really, sometimes quietly there, but there, and intervening in a really important way. So thank you very much. And also, I think that we just went through a case, a struggle, and has been defined by some as struggle for free speech, and we had to frame it a certain way to go into a courtroom and to go out into the world to help people recognize some things about what was happening. But it is significant that we talk about Aaron Bushnell, because in the final, when you get to the essence of the question, it was about free speech. He had to go in front of this Israeli entity and torch himself before the news media would even pay attention to what was being said. Yeah. He couldn't get the Washington Post and the New York Times and all of these other forces to write about these issues. It took him setting himself ablaze that forced him to even say anything about it. This was his press release, more or less, And also, I think what's meaningful about Bushnell, it was left colonial criticism. I so appreciated that he raised the point that people who, wanted to be opposed to apartheid and Jim Crow, all those were his references. Those were his references. They were not the last strike that happened at some factory in Detroit. It was what had happened to African people here, African people in Africa, etc. He recognized the essence of the contradiction, and he took it to Palestine. He took it to the doorstep of the Israeli embassy, and he did that. And I really appreciate Bushnell. He is ours. Yes. We claim Bushnell. We did the work that made Bushnell able to articulate in some ways the kinds of things that he said as he was dying. Yeah. He refused to participate in genocide. I saw somebody, since we've been here, and it makes the point too, with the shirt, there's no pride in genocide. And the statement is that for as quiet as it's kept, the lives of the colonizers rest upon the foundation of colonialism. It's true if the colonizer is someone who is oppressed because of sexual orientation, identity, and stuff like that, trans, doesn't matter. All the life of the colonizers rests upon the foundation of the colonized. And the reason that this argument can even be made, a T-shirt be worn in the United States, which is stolen colonized land. I mean, this is something that we recognize, and we must recognize it. Otherwise, it's just self-serving opportunism. that's one of the things that your existence in USM helps us to take out into the world. And that's important. Because our objective as the African People's Socialist Party is we're not engaged in some abstract struggle for free speech. The truth is, when you live in a situation, you live in a situation that is characterized by the mode of production within which it exists. A mode of production, we're talking about the entire process that people engage in and to feed, clothe, and house themselves. And from this process, that is the economic base. That's the economic base of society. The ideas spring from that. The ideology comes from that. The religion comes from that. The legal system is born on that. That's why you never see a legal system during slavery. Who ever heard of a legal system during slavery where it recognized the rights of the enslaved? That the enslaved had rights, so to speak. It doesn't work like that. So you have a legal system that says something like, or implies, if it doesn't say, I've heard it enough, I don't know if it's really law, or if it's just implicit in the relationship that is repeated, that possession is 99% of ownership. Possession. If you got it, that means 99% it belongs to you. Doesn't say where it came from, how you got it, who you took it from, where, or anything like that. Possession. That is a framework that stems on a foundation of stolen land, stolen resources, etc. Possession is 99%. And I'm the possessed. You know? I'm the possessed. And this is the relationship that we're talking about. I wanted to appreciate everybody for being here, and also to say that when we talk about solidarity with Black power, we're talking about solidarity with yourself. We are determined to knock down all of those barriers in your brains and otherwise that allow people who have allowed themselves to be defined and wallowed in this garbage of whiteness that separates you from the rest of the world. Somebody's not just white, they're white as opposed to being brown, black, and all the other people who are in the world. It's not even a true thing. What in the hell is whiteness? Whoever saw a white person? I saw somebody like that, though. But the truth is that it's an ideological concept. It's an ideological concept, loaded. It's just loaded with garbage that allows the settlers, the colonizers, to separate themselves from the rest of us. I heard even Martin Luther King not too long ago describing things that we used to talk about in the movement in the 1960s, how all whiteness was good. You know, wash sin, white as snow. And of course, there was Snow White. And all of this whiteness, the angel food cake and the devil food's cake, this thing of whiteness, it's a concept, it's an ideological concept that's based on an economic foundation that was used to separate this group of people from the rest of the world. And the process of creating this was the emergence of the nation that people brag about, nationalism and the white nation, white nationalism. Where the hell does it come from? Because what helped to define what we now know as white people and even give them that definition is the fact that as opposed to simply being Celts, and as opposed to simply being these other ethnic groups that come from Europe, that previously defined themselves in relationship to each other, the Visigoths, the Goths, the Normans, and all of this. This is what happened before. And what changed that, what brought this group together, was the fact that enslavement of African people was the first thing. 600 years ago, when a tiny, inconsequential at the time, Portugal, Look at Portugal on the map. Left Portugal and then went into the Canary Islands and went into Africa and began the process that came to be known as slavery and capturing African people. I'm here, and I like to remind people of this because they like to tell the lie that America is some kind of nation of immigrants. The fact is, America is not a nation. It's a prison of nations. And we are not immigrants, we're captives. And this is something that is problematic for people who have fallen into this whole American identification. It's hard to escape from that because the identity of a people is located in this concept of America. Who are you if you're not an American? Which is one of the reasons that settlers and colonizers have had such problems accepting my identification as an African, despite the fact that it's absolutely impossible for me to have got on a boat in Africa as an African in, 1492? Is that what it was? 1619. How the hell I get on a boat as an African in Africa and then get off in Jamestown, Virginia as a Negro? If I was an African when I got on the damn boat in Africa, I had to be an African when I got off the boat. Unless that was a magic boat. Unless somebody was on acid or something. Who defined this relationship. I just think so if this is a problem, because if I am not an African, then who the hell are you? This is your problem, not mine. You understand? Because it gets to some of the essential questions. Because the European, the English lost that identity, the British, the Irish, and what have you want to at least mask that identity with this process. But I'm looking for my identity. And guess what? The difference is that the oppressed has a stake in knowing the truth. The oppressed must know the truth as a consequence of being free. It's only as a prerequisite for freedom, the oppressed must seek out, must find out the truth. It is only the oppressor who has to liquidate, obscure, hide the truth, mask the truth, give it some other kind of characterization. That's why we always come up with different conclusions, the oppressed and the oppressor, looking for a truth. Right. My truth will bring liberation to me. Your truth keeps me oppressed. Anyway, I just wanted to say that the existence of the African People's Socialist Party has been one that sought its motion from a part of the process to rebuild the African Revolution, the struggle for the liberation of African people. It was not, again, just to fight for free speech. We said all along that this case of the Uhuru 3 that we were involved in, this movement was not a movement simply to keep somebody out of prison, to keep me out of prison. It was a movement to forward the revolutionary trajectory of our people to be free. We have a right and responsibility to be free. We have a responsibility to be free. It doesn't matter that it's dangerous, because who ever heard of an enslaved person easily getting free? We have a responsibility to be free. We have a responsibility to everybody who has come before us and everybody who will follow us. We have a responsibility to stop this kind of statement that I may not be free, but we may not do it in my lifetime, but the next generation, to hell with that. We say freedom in my lifetime. As I say this as an 83-year-old person, freedom in my lifetime. I refuse to leave this to another generation. I refuse to voluntarily make a statement that I will leave this for another generation to have to endure. And I mean endure. And I say this despite the fantasies that people have of what America is. And it's nothing but fantasy. resting upon a foundation of the graves of the indigenous people, enslaved African people, etc. I refuse to live on that fantasy. And you must too. Because one of the things that this movement does is to allow for white people to escape the trap that the colonial bosses, the colonial ruling class has created for you, that separates you from the rest of humanity with garbage of your specialness, of your significance versus everybody else's significant garbage. I spit on it. And you should too. You should reject that with every fiber of your being. You should reject being special on the graves of the indigenous people here. You should reject being special and in the face of the genocide of the Palestinians. You must reject that. You must join with the rest of us to create a new system. Let's go and get the slave masters. That's what this is about. So that's what we've been working on. This is not an easy thing because this movement was born. I initiated the movement to create the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement for a number of reasons. One of which was we were experiencing brutal, sometimes mass and sometimes targeted jailings and murder of black people. They killed Malcolm X. They murdered Malcolm X. The United States government murdered Malcolm X. And it's really interesting because they murdered Malcolm X in when? 1965. There were a whole bunch of significant things happened during that period, not the least of which was the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. And as a consequence of the struggles that black people were making, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, and the host of other folks who risked life in this country, on this land right here, the land of the home of the brave and the land of the free. Risked life just to try to join Joe Biden's Democratic Party. What the hell is that? Kill you, murder you, bomb your churches. This is the trajectory that we are part of. This is not a new phenomenon. We can't understand history as this truncated kind of thing that happens over here now, and then tomorrow it's over here someplace. No, it's one continuum that we're living with. There's a dialectic here that we must recognize. I just think that it's significant to understand that the African People's Socialist Party is a product, first of all, of the colonial domination of African people. Secondly, from that period when the world was involved in freedom struggle. The vast majority of people on earth, were involved in the freedom struggle. And the freedom that we were fighting for was one that had been taken from us and held in the name of white people.
Uhuru, you're listening to the keynote speech from this year's Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention, delivered by Chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela. This is Reparations in Action on Black Power 96.
All the stuff that came into the creation of this colonial mode of production that we're talking about, the process through which all life, human life, is produced and reproduced, came to be known as genocide when it was applied to white people. When it intruded in the lives of white people, they started calling it genocide. They gave it a name. They gave it a special kind of name. It was normal when it was happening to indigenous people. We don't even know how many indigenous people were murdered in the process. We don't even know how many black people were enslaved and transferred across the world, the whole continent of Africa. The entire continent of Africa came under siege. I have read that just Portugal alone at some time had Africa surrounded with ships capturing black people and taking us to forms of enslavement. And this process of taking us into enslavement from Africa. This was installed in people talk about reparations. What's her name? T'Challa Jones with her reparations commission. You have these people talking about reparations in different places. But the fact is that it was Africa that came under assault. We can talk about reparations in St. Louis because of the attack that was made on Africa. If you think about reparations, how much is owed to Africa? Reparations, not just the amount of wealth that comes every day, every minute, every second out of Africa coming into supermarkets, into other institutions in this country, but we're talking about all of the stolen labor. The labor that built St. Louis, the labor that built the United States, the labor that built Amsterdam, the labor that built Holland, the labor that built Paris and the rest of it. Is that owed to Africa? I say yes. And with compounded, is that what you call it? Interest rates, right? This is what we're talking about. This is how a whole process gets born and relationships get developed and relationships of production come into existence on an international level. Today, I'm looking at so much that's being written about colonialism. Just in the last 3 years, you can find books written on settler colonialism. There's one book that I've just bought accidentally because it talked about settler colonialism, written by a Zionist. And he's talking about how settler colonialism is such a phony concept, and it makes the white people, the bad people, and and the people of color, quote unquote. I don't even know what the hell that is. The good people, etc. It comes up with these extraordinary kinds of arguments against the notion. There's one book I just saw, I purchased. Talks about the good that German colonialism actually did. The good of German colonialism. This is a colonialism in a defensive mode. Right. For one thing, this is colonialism in a defensive mode, trying to defend itself from the world that it sees emerging now. Right. But the other thing about it is that I'm looking at these books, and none of them mentions the African People's Socialist Party. None of them mentions Omali Yeshitela. And they can't, because for them, it's just an abstract debate. It's an academic kind of statement. And they know what we are doing is preparing to govern. Our responsibility is to have the capacity to feed, clothe, and house and govern ourselves. That's what we're involved in. We reject the notion that some external force can come from someplace and capture black people and set up laws and regulations that we have to live by, that negate our own significance as human beings, steal our culture, and call it American. I've confronted Africans here and other places, and especially in the United States, who say things like, well, you can't be African because you don't have any African culture. The fact is, African culture is so ubiquitous, you just don't recognize it as African anymore because everybody else uses it, steal it. They call it crossover and all kinds of things like that. African culture is everywhere. Yes. If it were not for African culture in this country, what the hell would you be looking at? What would you be listening to? You can't even claim hillbilly music. They call it country and western now. Because it has its origin in Africa. You can't even claim the forms of your Christian religion. If it weren't for African, all religious experiences in this country would sound like Catholicism or something. It's African that has this impact. So African culture is ubiquitous, so much so that we don't even recognize it as African culture. I challenge anybody to challenge me on that question. Because there's somebody, well, I'm from Senegal, and I can tell you that you don't have African culture. Why can you say that? Because your culture doesn't look like mine, but it doesn't look like yours if I'm in South Africa either. Not exactly. It has the same origin. Ray Charles has the same origin as Fela. Same origin. James Brown has the same origin. John Lee Hooker, the same origin as Fela. Your gospel music, the same origin as Fela. It's African. But the thing is that this whole question of colonialism, they cannot talk about what we've contributed to this movement. We wrote about it, we defined it, but not just as some abstract concept, as a part of the process of taking back our freedom and becoming self-governing. And the reason that's the problem is because what people have come to recognize, and people are scared to death of Trump, Donald John Trump, etc., and I ain't scared because the one who was killing us was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and John F. Kennedy and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. All of them were doing these horrible things to African people. And Trump is just the latest iteration. And Trump is somebody who came into existence now because the world order that was created after the Second World Imperialist War, the World War II as its reference, that came about when most of the colonial powers of the world were fighting each other. There were no good guys in that war. This was a war to redivide the world. It's what it was among colonial power, redivide the world. And the only exception to that no good guys in that war would have been the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union was under assault because its involvement was always connected since the emergence of the Soviet Union. It's always been connected to the struggle against colonialism, colonized peoples all around the world. In fact, in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia was able to happen because Lenin and the Bolsheviks refused to participate with the rest of the European powers to fight that war to redivide the world. They refused to and they broke out of the war, and this made them an enemy to all of the colonial powers. Anybody remember that? And then in 1918, Russia, the Russia that they say that we work for, that Russia in 1918 was attacked by the United States and all the colonial powers, including Japan. They invaded Russia. What else was happening during that time frame? Marcus Garvey, 11 million African people around the world who were determined to be free. Marcus Garvey. This is the same time frame that we're talking about Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is the same time frame that colonized people in this country and around the world were trying to be free. This is what influenced the emergence of the Bolshevik Revolution. This is what even influenced how Lenin understood things that's different from what was happening in the rest of Europe. Why would that be the case? Because the rest of Europe came into modernity how? Through slavery and colonialism. That's not true of Russia. Russia did not achieve modernity through slavery and colonialism. That's why there are people in this room, Africans, with English last names, with Irish last names, with French and Spanish last names. But I doubt if there's any African in there with a Russian last name. Because Russians did not do that to us. And frankly, I'm not saying that Russians are some pure species or something like that, but they're different. My experiences, they're different. I was there in Moscow, and I've been places in this world where I didn't know a single person. I've been places surrounded by white people, and I can tell attitudinally whether I was welcome there or not, whether I wish I would get the hell off the same bus with them. I didn't experience that with Russia. I did not experience that with Russia in Moscow, etc. What I did experience in Moscow, in this what is called a subway here, is on the loudspeaker, Paul Robeson singing the Internationale in Russian. What I did experience in Moscow was a statue and a square named for Pushkin, who was one of the most influential poets in Russia, who was an African man. I experienced what used to be Patrice Lumumba University, that was in Russia, that was in Soviet Russia. This is the Moscow. That's quite different. You won't find that. They're tearing down statues here. Every time we get a chance, we tear down a statue. But in Moscow, it was all right, the statues that I saw. So there's a difference. And then in Moscow, when they made this war, in the Second Imperialist World War, the U.S., for a while, it was Russia who won the Second Imperialist World War, who defeated the Nazis. It was Russia. It was Russia. It was Russia that defeated the Nazis. They lost 27 million people fighting against the Nazis. The Russians did that. It was the Russians who seized Berlin, Germany, and replaced that swastika with the hammer and the sickle. It was Russia who did that. And the United States didn't even enter the war until the last minute and claimed won World War II, etc. Russia paid that price. And Russia was significant, and the United States didn't enter for partially because they wanted Russia and Germany to destroy each other, to weaken each other, so that the United States had full sway over everything. And when Russia came out of that on top, it was a problem for them. They had great meetings and great photo ops with Churchill and Stalin and Roosevelt, etc. But as soon as it was possible, and as soon as it was clear that Russia was not going to go down the same road they were going down, Russia became an enemy. And then they created this thing that was called the Atlantic Charter, the Atlantic Bloc. And the Atlantic Bloc included all the colonial powers. And it was partially created to isolate and destroy Russia when possible. This was a means by which the colonial powers would create a democratic process through which they would control the world, the colonized peoples of the world, so that it wouldn't be necessary for them to go to war with each other anytime they wanted to get this piece of land, that piece of land, from that place to that place. They had a democratic process. They called it, at this instance, the United Nations. Before then, it was the League of Nations. And the League of Nations, United Nations, as you know, a handful of countries being able to, with how many, 100 and how many, 40 some odd countries, 50 some odd countries supposed to be a part of it, with only 4 or 5 of them having the right to veto anything that the General Assembly put forth. They can veto anything. And initially that was the United States. That was, who else was that? Russia? Who else was that? Say it again. China was the Shanghai Kai-shek. That was Kuomintang China. That was not free China that they had. That was a lick spittle China. That was China that they controlled. That was a puppet China that they had there with them. They could veto anything anybody wanted to do. So you had all these countries, they can talk like hell. They can talk, say such and such a thing, and then when it came to a vote, if the United States and others didn't like it, they could veto it. Any one of them could veto it. So it was a rigged thing from the beginning. But it created this peaceful, parliamentary way that they can talk about dividing the world. They didn't have to go to war with each other. They can make this argument in the United Nations. It can be a popular determination that would occur. And so, in the top of that, they created what? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That's the organization that was just in Ukraine. And who leads that organization? United States. They created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What was the North Atlantic Treaty Organization created for? To contain and destroy Russia, if necessary. Create this military relationship, this military alliance to deal with Russia. That's what it was created for. They created the World Bank to control the economy of the whole planet Earth. They created the International Monetary Fund. This is part of what came to be the Atlantic Bloc. They controlled the world, and Russia was an outcast because Russia was problematic because it was not part of the colonial club. And in addition to that, Russia was talking about workers of the world. And they had based on exploiting the workers of the world, right? And who was more exploited as a worker than an African who was brought into this situation as enslaved labor? Whose lands? You got a whole continent of Africa, 12.5 million square miles of land, rich land. Filthy rich land, so much so that they continue to fight over it today. So much so that the contradiction between Russia, China, and the United States concentrated on Africa, African resources, starving Africa, etc. This is part of the relationship that we're looking at in this colonial mode of production. So Trump is elected, and he gets elected because this whole process of isolating Russia has left a lot of Russian resources untapped by some of the colonial powers. France can't go there. If they go there, they can be sanctioned by the United States, because the United States has been the primary force that you can't go to Russia. You can't do any economic stuff with Russia. England can't go there. Nobody can go in. And Russia is rich in terms of natural resources, mineral resources, but they can't get it. And so, and Russia never had the advantage of stealing resources from Jamaica, from much of Africa, and all these other places. And Russia attempts to enter into the colonial mode of production to get resources, and it's a problem. And Trump, he moves forward. He sees Russia. He wants a piece of that resource in Russia. Everything is transactional with Trump. How can I get some of that? And there were other people like Trump who were left out of the deal of the Atlantic Bloc. And so these are the forces that Trump brought into this arrangement, or at least, if not Trump, Steve Bannon brought into this relationship. And what they did was, if you saw, Trump surprised himself and surprised the world, because he was not supposed to win that election. He was not supposed to win that election. And everybody was shocked. And Trump ran on being opposed to NATO, opposed to the United Nations, opposed to nation building. In other words, attacking other countries and recreating them. People said, damn, this guy sounds like an anti-war person, anti-imperialist. That's what Trump sounded like to many people. I heard people describe him in that fashion. If you saw the Republican convention, then when Trump, that's all they were talking about, getting rid of NATO, getting rid of the United Nations, getting rid of all these wars and stuff that was happening. They said, yeah, that's what we want to go with. Many people did. And also, Trump was important to a lot of people because he said the whole election thing is rigged anyway. Remember he said that? He said, I know it's rigged because everybody who you're looking at, they've been paid for by the rich. He said, I know because I used to pay them myself. That's what he said. He said, when my daughter got married, I told Hillary Clinton, come show up, and she was there. You know, because I paid them to do this stuff, right? He said, it's fake news. The news is fake. It's fake news. Everybody knew there was some truth in what he was saying, and everybody was disgusted in the status quo, and people were looking for a way out of the status quo. That's why many people went with Bernie Sanders, because they thought that he was a status quo, because he was a Walmart socialist. I call him a Walmart socialist because his socialism was one that would be $15 an hour over a number of years. Hell, Walmart just did it yesterday. What the hell is, that makes Sam Walton the president. But many people were attracted to it, and they went with Bernie Sanders because of that. And then many people with Donald Trump because they knew that the whole thing was rigged. They were disgusted by it, and they were disgusted by the status quo. And they didn't know about us. They didn't know where to go, which way to go, etc. And the so-called left was too timid. It was afraid of white people. It wouldn't organize white people, would not recognize that there are legitimate contradictions that white people face. Everything they saw revolved around the Democratic Party and their relationship to the Democratic Party. And so Trump won the election based on that. You saw when Trump got elected, everybody who was associated with Trump damn near went to jail, didn't they? They put his campaign manager, what's his name, Manafort, they locked him up, said he was working for what? Russia. They took Kelly, who was Kelly in his administration? He was a general, come on. Was he chief of staff? They said he was what? A Russian agent, working for Russia. They attacked so many, they put a lot of them in jail. They attacked Trump himself. And this was the Democratic Party doing this. I don't care if we say it was the law. And because we faced the law, and they were telling us that the charges they were making against us didn't matter what we said. It's the fact that Russians pay. It says content neutral. The law is content neutral, which is garbage. And first of all, if you own African slaves, if you're colonized and you make the law, they like to brag about this is a rule-based society. Hell, who made the damn rules? Understand? And who enforces the law? They say stopping at a stop sign, That doesn't say if black people stop at the stop sign that we'll do something, or if you run a stoplight, we'll do something. But the fact is, they have the police there in all my community to make sure if I run the stop, I'm going to jail. Even though it's content neutral on the one hand, what they do is make sure that I'm the one who pays the price for it. Yeah. They made a pig law at the end of slavery. It was content neutral. You steal a pig, you go to prison for 15 years. Why? Because after slavery, the Africans who had fed the pig, bred the pig, done all the work in the plantations to grow the stuff, the Africans refused to work for the white man and then they just started walking. And when we got someplace we got hungry, what we do? Get the damn pig and kill the pig and eat it. 15 years, pig law. It was content neutral. But they create the conditions where you would be the one. Just like they made a law. They're making laws, and people are being sucked into this process, legalizing marijuana. So now marijuana is legal. You got thousands of men and women in prison off marijuana charges. But the thing is, I used to say a long time ago, if they want Africans to stop using dope, all they have to do is put up in a tractor trailer painted red, white, and blue. With somebody dressed like Uncle Sam and passing the dope out. But the fact is, Uncle Sam is not a dope man. Why? Well, not.
Anybody can be a junkie.
Right? But who? And it's not going to be people like Hunter Biden, the most likely. Hunter Biden is a prima donna. He is somebody who does it to get a kick. He's somebody like white people who go bungee jumping and stuff because they don't know what it is to be scared normally. You understand? And so Hunter Biden gets naked in a bathtub and does crack. This is an adventure for him. But Africans who do that stuff, it's a form of dealing with the oppression all the time that we live with. Who's more likely to do that than African people? And why would the oppressor pass out dope? Because he wants you to be a dope. He wants you to be able to endure everything. He wants you to be able to solve the problems of oppression, not by dealing with the oppression, but dealing with your head. We got Donald Trump. Many people are frightened. But we're building the party, and our objective is to govern. We're dealing with colonized people. I want to express my appreciation for you. When Gaza over here was part of the Vine City Project, talking about black power and whatever, and all the white power people get out SNCC and go to the white community, and because that's where the problem is, go organize there. And all the white people got so upset and said, you betrayed us and you've done all this stuff to us. And then they discovered at this moment, this is when they discovered Vietnam. Vietnam was there all along. Who was one of the first come out in opposition to Vietnam? SNCC was on the front. SNCC was the one who put the slogan, hell no, we won't go. SNCC actually got on buses where they were taking recruits into military bases and actually attacked the damn officers that was there on the ground. That was SNCC doing that. And then, but the white people, when SNCC said go to the white community and organizing the white community with the country, they just go to Vietnam. And so this critical issue that they saw first with the African people got sidelined. And part of it because they couldn't lead it. Because they couldn't make it fit their definition of what the objective should be. These white people in SNCC said that the fundamental contradiction was in SNCC was the relationship between men and women. That's how I got introduced into SNCC. Not the contradiction that SNCC was dealing with, trying to solve the problems that we were confronted with as a people. So we've taken that on. And Afia, as I said, she played a major role in helping to find that. And the African People's Socialist Party, under my leadership, has concluded that the biggest contradiction we face is not the absence of a discussion, but the absence of practice to make freedom happen. Make freedom happen. one of the problems they had with SNCC, because even simple slogans that were merged, I think it was NAACP might have had a slogan, freedom, or something like that, and SNCC said what? Freedom now, freedom now. And can you imagine that, the controversy that came out of SNCC's declaration of freedom now? And that's the thing that brought me to SNCC, among other things. And the thing that brought me to SNCC also was SNCC was an organization of practice. It went to live with the people to help transform the conditions on the ground with the people, recognizing the significance of the people's role in making it happen. SNCC did that. And SNCC was referred to as the saints, by even the white people who wrote about them. SNCC, the saints, went into all the most extraordinarily dangerous. SNCC would go into places the NAACP and STLC wouldn't go. Wouldn't go. They were supposed to be so dangerous. And so that's the organization. And SNCC, in part, despite the tremendous amount of intellectual courage they took into it, and they were courageous. I think about that sometime when Africans talking about they don't want to go into some of our communities now to do work because it's dangerous in the community. I'm telling you, it was not as dangerous as it was going into places in Mississippi and Georgia, South Georgia, Alabama, Florida. It wasn't that dangerous going up against those white people, what you're talking about now. We can organize our people. We have a responsibility to do that. And that's what the African People's Socialist Party is about. I'm not here to make this a better colonialism. Colonialism must go. Colonialism must go. People must be free. And this is the road toward the liberation of white people, because you're trapped in this dialectic. When you talk about dialectics, you're talking about a unity of opposites. That's what dialectics is, a unity of opposites. Can be no up without down, can be in without out, etc. Can be no slave without slave owners, slave masters, etc. People who take away that. And what we are saying is that we can build a new world that destroys slavery. When you destroy slavery, you destroy the slave owners, you destroy the slave, and you destroy the slave owner at the same time. There are no slaves and no slave owners in the world that we want to create. It's one world. And what we have a responsibility to do is find and defeat this social system, and to know what holds this social system together. There's a new book, a new edition of Foreign Affairs. Foreign Affairs is a journal of the Atlanticist bloc. It's a journal of the ruling class. You won't find it in your checkout line when you go to the supermarket looking at Elvis on the moon. You understand? It's a journal of the ruling class. It's initially it was the Rockefeller Senate kind of thing, and this latest journal for this month is titled "The Center Can't Hold," and there's a fist being driven into it. This map that they've constructed. Of course, their responsibility as writers for this journal is to show how we can make it whole. This is to the ruling class, not just of this country, but of the Atlantic bloc, who wrote The Prince? This is what Machiavelli was. This journal is what Machiavelli was for the rulers of that era, for the Medici, and they feeding the ruling class these ideas about what makes it work and what the problems are and how to get forward. That's what Foreign Affairs is. And for the longest period now, part of it's revolved around who was going to rule the world, what was going to be the United States or China, and how the United States and China how the United States can lead from behind and recognize the significance of China. It doesn't have to try to be this great imperial power up front. It can do it from behind. But the United States can't do that. Neocolonialism is white power in blackface. It exists here in St. Louis on a local level. It existed with Obama. It tried to exist with Kamala Harris. It's white power in blackface. And so this is what they had exercised against us. And neocolonialism becomes necessary when the oppressed begin to say, kill the white man. destroy the white man, get rid of the white colonizers, etc. And then they can't come in his own face anymore. So he comes in my face. They eat the same fool of people for a period of time. But neocolonialism is a statement of the weakness of the bourgeoisie. But neocolonialism is a victory for liberalism, white liberalism. The neocolonialism is a victory for the Democratic Party. It's a victory for Johnson, who helped to overthrow Nkrumah, and Kennedy, who, along with Eisenhower, killed Lumumba in Congo, who did so many atrocious things in this country. Neocolonialism is a victory for liberal imperialism, for the Democratic Party. The so-called conservatives, in this contest with the conservative sectors of the colonial power, ruling class. This is a victory for liberals, because the conservative is the one who, because the liberals have concluded that it's better not to have to fight them, bring them in, because if you do this horrible oppression, etc., you're just asking for a fight. They're going to fight, so pay them up. Give them free food. Give them this and that to keep the center, keep the thing functioning the way it should function. It's the so-called conservative colonizers who wants to keep things as it's always been, or reactionary who wants to go back to the past. They say use the hammer. They say we don't give a damn. Don't give them anything but bullets. Give them the army. Give them more police, etc., etc. This is a contest between liberal colonialism and so-called conservative or reactionary colonialism. What has happened now is Donald John Trump represents a victory over liberal colonialism, and he's brought the hammer, and he's doing everything to destroy all of the infrastructure, all of the things that the Democratic Party has survived off, all of the welfare systems that created jobs and institutionalized resources for white liberals and sections of the African petty. He's destroyed it all. Everybody's screaming bloody murder. Oh, we can't get Walmart and Target, get Target, etc. I say get Target your own Target. That's what he's given us the opportunity to do. That's what the Black Power Blueprint tells us, that we don't worry, we go and create our own Target, create our own institution. We believe in self-determination. We are fighting against colonialism, whether it comes in a liberal face or a reactionary face. We want total, absolute freedom. We would want freedom for Kamala Harris's Democratic Party as much as from Donald Trump's Republican Party. Uhuru communist.
Uhuru. That was Chairman Omali Yeshitela speaking at the Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention held this year in St. Louis, Missouri. You can watch the rest of the convention on the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's YouTube page. My name is Brendan McCoy, and I want to thank you for listening to another episode of Reparations in Action. Uhuru!